Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking a little bit about arrow functions and how this keyword is used with arrow functions and normal functions. So with that, let's get started. Alright, so what we're going to do first is just take a normal JavaScript function and then we're going to reduce it down to an arrow function. So in this we have a function called sum which just returns x plus y. So if we save this and pass in 2 and 3, it will return 5. Perfect. So what we can do is say sum is equal to a function, and this is not using an arrow function yet, but you're going to see how this is going to introduce how we use arrow functions. So we set sum is equal to function, and we can still call it the same way because we know that sum is going to be equal to this function, and then we can pass in these parameters. So we hit save, and you can see it refreshed and still hit 5, but just to make it more clear, 4 plus 3 is 7. Awesome. So moving on from that, we can take away the function keyword, and this is where the arrow function is going to come in. So after our parameters, we're going to say arrow and then open the brace and say return x plus y. So we have our function name, and then we have parameters that are going to go into the function, and we have the arrow, and then open and close the brace for our actual function body. So then let's go down here, let's change this to be 5, save, then we see that we have 9. So this is actually an arrow function already. So what we can do is make this even a little bit neater, and we can reduce this to be all the way in one line. So in here we can delete this brace, delete the other brace, and then delete our return. So what this says is sum is equal to these inputs, and then it's going to return x plus y. The return here does not need to be written down because the JavaScript understands that you're going to return x plus y because we only have one statement. So if we hit save, you can see that it's still 9. Just for clarity, we can show 6 plus 5 is equal to 11. Perfect. So we reduced that all the way from the original function, which was function sum, to this one-liner. So that you can see how that can help people and how concise it's going to be when it comes to using these arrow functions in code, because it reduces developer fatigue. So what you can also do is we're going to look at how the arrow function behaves with a single parameter and then also without any parameters. So in here we're going to say just x, and we're going to say instead of the sum we're just going to say the square. So we're going to return x times x. So then here we can return result is equal to the square of, in this case let's say 5. So if we hit save, we can see 25 is what we get. Perfect. So when we have one parameter, there's a special case in which we can delete the parentheses around our parameter that we're passing into the function. So if we hit save, we can see that it's still 25, or 36 in this case. So that's reducing it all the way down to here. Now, if we were to pass in no parameters, we will get an error. Let's say console log, this should not appear. So as you can see, if we don't have parentheses around a no parameter function, it's already going to throw an error, and it's saying that a parenthesis is expected. So what we can do is try to hit save, and it says that there's going to be a syntax error. So put in our parentheses to show that there's going to be no parameters passed into this function, and we can say this should appear. We hit save, and it says this should appear. Now you can see that it's also saying undefined, but that's because we passed in 6 originally. So if we delete this, and oops, I'm sorry, we don't want to delete that. We want to say we just call the square function, not pass in anything, and then let's comment this out. So we can see that by calling the function with no parameters, we have to include the parentheses so that it knows that this function is not going to take in parameters. So now that we have that, we can see how we can write all the way from a regular function down to a concise arrow function. So now that we've looked at how we can make functions more concise, we're going to look at how the this keyword works within JavaScript. So the this keyword was part of the reason that arrow functions were originally introduced. Some people get confused by the this keyword, or I guess most people within JavaScript. So when we look at a function, as you can see here, we have a function called person. And we set the window age to be 10, and then we say this.age to be 42. And we're going to log the this.age variable after 100 milliseconds. So we just have a set timeout. And so when we say let p equal to new person, it's going to run this and it's going to log this.age. Now, as you can see, we have a regular function within this person. So this is going to default to the window object. So if we hit save, it's going to say this.age is equal to 10. And that's because we set window.age is equal to 10. So in here, this is actually referring to the window because regular functions are going to default to the window object. So to alleviate this, we can say have an arrow function. So with an arrow function, they do not default the this to the window object. Instead, they take into account where they are created. So in here, we see that we created this arrow function within this person object. So we have this.age is equal to 42. Inside here, it should have access to this.age because the arrow function is being declared inside this person. So if we hit save, we can see this.age is equal to 42. So now that we've seen how the this keyword works with both functions and arrow functions, you can see why arrow functions were introduced to help alleviate some of the confusion surrounding the this keyword. So some of you may be coming from an object-oriented background. So in this case, we're going to be looking at a class example. And in this, we have a class called Parr, which has a constructor where you pass in a model, and then this.model is set to be the model that's passed in. And in this case, we have two methods for this car, which sounds kind of funny, but yes, we have two methods for this car. So we have showCarModel, which is going to be set timeout, and then it's going to log the this.model variable. In here, you can see that we're using an arrow function. And then below, we have the same exact thing, except we're going to use the function keyword. So this is going to show the difference between using an arrow function or using the function keyword within a class method. So down here, we're just going to comment out the bottom one, and we're going to say showCarModel. So in here, we hit save, and we can see car class equals new car, Honda. We passed in Honda, and then we called on our car, we called showCarModel. And in that, you can see that it printed out Honda. Now, that was using an arrow function, because as we talked about, how the function and arrow function uses the this keyword differently. Now, we're going to look at the other side, which is going to be the showCarModel function. The showCarModel function is going to be using the function keyword. So if we hit save, then it shows us undefined. And that's because that's how we talked about how the function is going to be bound to the window object. So now that we've looked at the class example, let's look at using these within an object. Now we're going to be looking at the CarModel object. And in here we have var CarModel object, and then we have a model of Acura showCarModel object, and this is going to be a function. And in here we're going to log the model similar to how we were before. So this right here does not create a new scope. However, the function is going to be bound to this object. So if we hit save, we can see that Acura is going to be printed out because it has access to this.model. However, if we were to create an arrow function right here, this does not have its own scope because we're only creating an object. So if we hit save, this is now going to be undefined. And now we have almost the reverse of what happened earlier. Because in this, we have this keyword is not created because a scope is not created by an object. So this .model is going to be bound to the window object, and in this case is going to be undefined. So that's going to be our last example. I hope this video clears up how the this keyword works within JavaScript with arrow functions and regular functions. Also, if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more JavaScript related content on the channel, please like and subscribe.